Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today, and welcome back to Lindsey Granger. Nice
Thank
to see
you
again.
I love coming back into all the Christmas decor. See the tree behind us and our nice
plants.
plants.
Decked it out with balls and holly. What's this? What is this song? That's not right. It's too early.
It's too early, but I
early.
am excited about the Christmas season. I feel like everybody's putting their OOO out of office messages. Just holler at them in January type messages on their emails at work. But
Is that what they're
we're
doing?
still here.
We're still here.
We're still here.
How was your vacation?
It was nice. I relaxed and did absolutely nothing.
And you had a harrowing journey back, you said.
Oh yeah, Amtrak did me dirty, like it usually does. I don't want to talk about it though. Amtrak did me terribly, but I know they tried their best. It was icy outside. Trains were all delayed. Planes were delayed yesterday. So I'm here though. I showed up.
Well,
I'm here.
Even though we're starting on a merry note, we've got some really serious stories to discuss today.
Yep, coming up on Rising, we'll be discussing the Bondi beach attack in Australia that has left at least 15 people dead.
And then also the deadly shooting at Brown University killed at least 2 and injured 9.
And breaking overnight, actor and director Reiner was found dead alongside his wife in their Los Angeles home. It's a lot. But first,
Yeah.
Robby, what's on your radar?
Also a serious story. It's been a dark few days. There's no way around it. We plan to spend significant time, obviously, discussing all these atrocities around the world, from Australia to our own shores. But first, 3 Americans, 2 U.S. soldiers, and a civilian interpreter were killed in Syria over the weekend as well. They were murdered by ISIS terrorists who continue to operate within that country. Now, President Donald Trump mourned their deaths on Truth Social, writing, quote, "This was an ISIS attack against the U.S. in Syria, in a very dangerous part of Syria that is not fully controlled by them. The president of Syria, Ahmed al-Sharaa, is extremely angry and disturbed by this attack. There will be very serious retaliation. Thank you for your attention to this matter." Indeed, al-Sharaa is himself a former extremist, but one who now favors engagement with the West. That's a good thing. And he's working to eliminate terrorists within his own country. Syria has been a victim of chronic instability for years. ISIS initially gained a foothold there owing to the chaos of the Bashar al-Assad regime. Since Assad's ouster, al-Sharaa has been working to stabilize the country, and he has President Trump's full support. And that's a good thing. But it does not mean that the U.S. needs to have an active presence in Syria or elsewhere in the Middle East. And that's really the point of all of this. In fact, that's my question, given this news. Why put our troops in harm's way at all? Do U.S. troops really belong in Syria anymore? The answer, of course, is no. Trump understands this and has been working to pull U.S. troops out of the region. Unfortunately, per usual, military leaders do not agree with the president and have tried to talk him into leaving several hundred soldiers. Currently, there are 1,000 U.S. troops in Syria, and look, no way around it, they need to come home. Now, we can and should support the mission to defeat ISIS. ISIS is a death cult, a sworn enemy of the civilized world, and it is right and proper for us to work with our allies around the globe to take them out. But that does not mean we need boots on the ground in areas where our soldiers are vulnerable to attack. No more dead American soldiers overseas. That should be our mission and our mantra. And it's one Trump understands and is working to implement. One wishes he would just have more support from senior military leaders. But one person whose support he does enjoy in this vision is Senator Rand Paul, who said on Meet the Press this weekend that it's time to bring home the troops.
I was with the president in the first administration that a couple of hundred troops in Syria are more of a tripwire than a strategic asset. I don't think they deter war. I think they basically, because Americans are targets and jihadists around the world think they can get great glory and provoke terrorism by killing an American, that they become potential targets and tripwires to more interaction. Yes, the people who killed our soldiers should be punished, but really we need to reassess whether or not we should have troops in Syria to begin with.
Paul has it exactly right. We can make Americans and America safer if we withdraw troops from dangerous areas of the world. We can continue to support our allies' anti-terrorism efforts and also defeat ISIS once and for all without putting American lives in harm's way. And this really horrible tragedy, I think, again shows the risks that people, very few people, but Rand Paul being one of them, have warned about for years, which is when we have troops stationed in unstable parts of the world and they get attacked, well, we can't just let that happen. We have to respond. We have to get more involved. We have to bring the perpetrators to justice. We have to kill more of them. But just having our people there, we're having them in harm's way. We're inviting some kind of attack. That's not a smart policy. It's not necessary. we can conduct anti-terrorism efforts from a distance in partnership with someone like al-Sharaa, who I'm glad is working with the U.S., and I'm glad it has a positive relationship with Donald Trump. We've got a lot of, a lot has been improved since he's taken over, but it's not perfect. But that counterterrorism effort can be conducted without us having so many ground troops there. The American people don't want them there. People are always shocked to learn, wait, what do you mean we have ground troops in Syria? We still have ground troops in, XYZ country in the Middle East. I thought we voted to bring everybody home. That's always a rude awakening. It's sad, and it's unfortunately needless.
And you pointed out in your radar that Syria is in this politically fragile position as it changes leadership and goes through the changes. But sometimes I also, and I agree with you, because I feel that when we have troops in certain areas of the world, it's more symbolic than it does for safety or serve purpose. And so I think the troops being there and being in potentially harm's way is not the best solution. I think we also have examples of responding to several incidents like this, or even bigger incidents around the world, where we end up pulling our troops anyway that we activated in, like places like Afghanistan or even Vietnam. We can go back in history where we activated fully and convinced the world that we need to retaliate or we need to move forward in whatever way. The military might have been pushing our president, or the president may have been pushing our military. But then we leave, and we often find that a lot of these regimes go back to new formations, like how ISIS formed, in the wake of 9/11. It came after that, or if, regimes go back. Afghanistan, I think Taliban took back over after we left there, and in a terrible way that we left.
I mean, ISIS itself formed, in the vacuum that existed after we overthrew so many regimes in the Middle East. They particularly benefited from the death of Muammar Gaddafi, who it was completely due to U.S. intervention that his regime toppled. Someone who was reprehensible, but who had actually sought greater reconciliation with America and with the West in recent years, and we still orchestrated his downfall. And then look what we got. We got people being, beheaded in the streets in that country by ISIS, by this reprehensible terror group.
I think the bigger concern, though, of what I heard from you is that the president, he must listen to the military, when really his role is to kind of command the military. Like, the buck stops with the president.
Yes, thank you. That annoys me quite a bit when our elected Democratic leader has his foreign policy thwarted by the deep state. That's what it is.
Thwarted means that he has to be part of the bureaucratic game. Yeah,
they should answer to him.
And that's not the way that. And it seems interesting because it's only with certain entities within our government or people that the president reserves comment or doesn't. Anytime he wants anything done, for the most part, he's very vocal about it, even if it goes against any traditional conservative norms or anybody within his party. But with the military, he's very much following the lead. Is it because that's not his strong suit across all the things in the ways that he wants to lead?
Strong suit, but I think he's very good at foreign policy. I think he listens to his military leaders, but he is sometimes at odds with them, because I would I would argue that military leaders, they're trying to figure out how to win the battle, right? They're and I think, reluctant to say we should not even participate in this battle, right? They're formulating plans to make the best of whatever the situation is. It takes someone, every now and then, they're great military leaders and ones who are wise about restraint. We've had great military leaders throughout our American history: Eisenhower, Winfield Scott, Patton, and on. Creative, brilliant thinkers, and some of them committed very much to peace. But not all. A lot of military leaders, I think modern military leaders, think of it as trying to solve a problem, and when the way to solve it is to be less engaged in the first place.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
That's a rift right now that we see with the America First policy. People who supported that and what's actually happening, and not just in Syria, but in several places, which could be Venezuela up next.
Yeah. Still ahead, Benjamin Netanyahu is lashing out at Australia's leaders after the deadly mass shooting in that country. We'll be right back.
A devastating attack over the weekend in Australia. 15 people were killed, including a child, after 2 gunmen opened fire during a Hanukkah celebration on Sydney's Bondi beach.
It was the deadliest shooting in the country in decades. Take a look at this video that was captured during the shooting. You can hear the gunshots ringing out, and you can see hundreds fleeing across the beach. Very disturbing footage. Now, at least 42 other people were injured in the chaos. That's according to officials alleging the shooters were a father and son duo. Now, the 50-year-old father reportedly shot and killed by police during this altercation. His 24-year-old son has been wounded and taken to a hospital.
Now, during the shooting, a bystander rushed one of the gunmen and wrestled his weapon away from him. Ahmed El Ahmad is recovering in the hospital after later being shot. This photo coming from New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, who called Ahmad a real-life hero and thanked him. He even received some praise from Trump. Take a listen.
In Australia, you probably read it's been a very, very brave person, actually, who went and attacked frontally one of the shooters and saved a lot of lives. So, very brave person who's right now in the hospital, pretty seriously wounded. So, great respect to that man that did that.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Foreign Ministry has confirmed that an Israeli citizen was killed, but didn't give any further details about that. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the shooting over the weekend, criticizing the Australian government for recognizing a Palestinian state. He said, quote, 4 months ago, I wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Australia. I told him, your policy encourages terrorism. It encourages anti-Semitism. You call for a Palestinian state. You are essentially giving a reward to Hamas for the terrible massacre they committed on us on October 7th. You are legitimizing all these rioters, and you are not lifting a finger to eliminate these centers of terror. This will lead to more murders. He did nothing. We know there will be more attacks.
Now, Australia has experienced a threefold surge in anti-Semitic attacks in the years since the October 7th, 2023 attack in Israel. In response to the shooting this weekend, police have been posted outside of synagogues across the country, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese condemned the violence.
So yesterday was an act of pure evil, an act of anti-Semitism, an act of terrorism on our shores in an iconic Australian location, Bondi Beach, that is associated with joy, associated with families gathering, associated with celebrations. And it is forever tarnished by what has occurred. We will do whatever is necessary to stamp out anti-Semitism. It is a scourge, and we will eradicate it together.
Early this morning, thousands gathered on Bondi Beach to pay tribute to the victims.
Just horrifying. Obviously, the footage of that bystander, Ahmed Al-Ahmad, confronting the gunman, saving lives, amazing act of heroism, being rightly celebrated by everyone. In so many of these mass casualty or shooting events, I know a common reaction people have is, why didn't someone, go up and throw yourself at the shooter? It takes tremendous courage and heroism to do that. The body's response is to shut down, to hide, or even to freeze in place. So to have the presence of mind, and he snuck up on him. He waited till he was looking the other way, and he grabbed the gun. So terrific behavior. I know the police response so far has been criticized for being slow, for the police being slow to confront the shooter. Obviously, it's still too soon to adjudicate exactly what if anything could be done better. But another in a time of rising anti-Semitism. Frankly, a number of these stories we're talking about today touch on potentially anti-Semitism. This one, very obviously, anti-Semitism. So thoughts and prayers for all affected by it.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible thing. It was a targeted attack, very obviously.
Right.
I think when I heard about the 10-year-old child being killed, that's another deeply saddening thing to hear. But anybody that was there, when you think about yesterday being the start of Hanukkah, for many people and their celebrations, and people this time of year, what it means to anybody of any background celebrating, it's mostly positivity and togetherness. It's time of gathering when you haven't seen people you love or you have likeness with for a while. You get together, and this is what was happening in Bondi Beach. And to see that people had that much hate in their heart, a father and son duo, which is even more disturbing, that a relationship like that's so coveted, a parent and their child both came together and said, let's go commit this heinous act together, is tragic. But like you said, the man that jumped into action is a hero, and there's so much to look at here. And when you look at Australia, they have some of the strictest gun laws in the world. And so this is not something that slipped. I know there's going to be a conversation around how to make gun laws even stricter. It's even been brought up by, no, it's been brought up by the Australian leadership already. And I'm like, well, there's not much you can do because if the father owned a gun in the state, I think lawfully, but the son had been looked at before by Australians' version of, let's say the FBI or some intelligence agency that looked into his behavior in the past, and they deemed him not to be a threat.
Right.
And so it makes, as we release information, it makes me wonder, what were the reasons that you were looking into him? How did he become deemed to not be a threat? And then how do we go back and figure out how to correct those cracks? Because every time that there's a shooting in the country, we look at how to take away the guns or change the laws in that regard, but we never look at how many steps they had to take to purchase the gun or mental health or anything else that goes with it. And I hope that this conversation doesn't just turn political, even though it's Australia.
That's political. I mean, that's the way, I know that's the way Democrats and liberals are going to talk about this as, how could gun laws be tweaked or adjusted to stop these kinds of things? Australia can do whatever it wants. I'm very skeptical that more additional laws on the books in the U.S. will do anything. We could enforce the laws we already have more vigorously, and that would deter crime. It wouldn't stop the kind of mass shooting events necessarily. But what many on the right are going to be discussing is, the elephant in the room, that this, as an example of Islamic extremism targeting Jewish people, something that is increasing, and the immigration questions that raises. Obviously, I don't know the exact circumstances of these people or their background quite yet. That's being looked at still, but the people of an extremist foreign religious idea coming to a country and perpetrating violence against Jewish people for that reason is something that many on the not just on the right, but many on the right consider to be the actual problem here, not guns.
And I think that the condemning of anti-Semitism almost, or if not immediately, is the first thought coming out of most leadership mouths, is the correct tone to take. I think that with Netanyahu's response, pointing blame, I don't know that you draw that exact direct line when many nations around the world are saying that there should possibly be a two-state solution for longevity in that region of the world. And so I think that there's two conversations that are going to happen. And I talk about this all the time in our own country when a shooting or an incident happens, even whether it's high profile or a local politician being hurt, and immediately anyone goes to, here's what you could have done better. Yeah. I think that that's not the right tone to take. And I think that we should just figure out, first of all, like our president did praise the hero, Ahmed, that moved forward and tried to tackle the victim, and then talk about the fact that nobody should be feeling unsafe during a time of spending time with loved ones, particularly from any community that's been feeling unsafe in our country for a long time. Mm-hmm. Up next, a deadly shooting at Brown University, and the suspect is still at large. Don't go anywhere. A manhunt for a shooter that killed 2 and injured 9 others continues. As of this morning, Rhode Island police have released a person of interest in the deadly shooting Saturday on the campus of Brown University in Providence. That shooting reportedly happened in a classroom in the engineering building while students were taking their final exams. Brown alerted students and faculty of an active shooter around the building at 4:30 Saturday. You can see someone dressed in black walking around the campus in this footage. Yesterday, Brown administration announced all classes and final exams were postponed.
In the early hours of the shooting, there was some confusion about whether an arrest had been made. Brown University at one point reported a suspect was in custody, and President Trump echoed that on Truth Social, writing, "I've been briefed on the shooting that took place at Brown University in Rhode Island. The FBI is on the scene. The suspect is in custody. God bless the victims and the families of the victims." That was later retracted, however, by both the university and also by Trump. He later gave his reaction to the shooting as the manhunt continued.
The Brown University situation, what a terrible thing it is. And all we can do right now is pray for the victims and for those that were very badly hurt, it looks like.
On Sunday, a person of interest was picked up by police, but again, that person of interest has been released after authorities said the evidence points actually in a different direction. Officials say right now they have no way of knowing if the gunman left the state. So he or she, I suppose, but he is still at large. We just have to wait, as Trump said, for investigators to figure out who that is and I have every confidence that they will eventually.
Yeah, this is a tragic situation, again, piling on to
Right.
the heartbreak of what's happening around this time. When I think about this time for college students, like they said, it was in the engineering building during final exams. When you think about a parent dropping their kid off for college, they assume they're going to be safe and go fulfill their wildest dreams as they pursue whatever their goals are. And when you think about a kid, they're looking forward to this break after these final exams to go home and be with their family. And when I watch some of that video, you see kids within that building and probably other buildings around the campus just ducking and hearing police barge in and not knowing if that's the shooter and somebody might have had those Google glasses on, I believe, because I was trying to figure out how they could tracking everything. But this one video I saw, they're like watching everything, and the police are like, if you have nothing in your hands, walk forward. And you see the person still recording, walking forward. It must have been on the glasses because their hands were in the air. And I just was like, how dramatic and scary are these moments at the same time when you're trying to figure out what's going on. And then there's a whole other piece to me that's happened a lot recently that I want the leadership in a variety of these situations to get right, from in D.C. with the National Guard shooting, announcing some information that has
Right, don't announce things
just
until
wait.
we're sure.
Yeah,
I agree.
I want
Just
leadership
wait.
to get it right,
let's
because
just wait.
think about all the families that have students there or students on campus that are just trying to figure out if they're okay, and you're hearing somebody's in custody, and then you wait, and there's a lot of back and forth that's happened.
Right.
I can't think of the third occasion, but there's been multiple in the recent month or two that's just been inaccurate or abrupt.
I fully agree.
And I think you rather be not first, you just
Right.
rather be right, especially when life or death situations are happening.
I agree. We should note the classroom that was targeted. The professor is Jewish, is a professor of economics and Judaism. So while we don't know the motivation, we don't have the suspect yet. The one they had was a person of interest, was released. Obviously, that the nature of that, given everything going on, is probably rightly making people wonder if this was yet another example of an anti-Semitic attack. Too soon to say if that was the motivation. It could just be coincidence. But a very between this and we're going to talk about Rob Reiner, who's an
Right.
iconic Jewish director, not who has been murdered. We're going to talk about and not murdered for reasons of anti-Semitism, but still an important person to the Jewish community. A really rough weekend, a really disturbing weekend for people who for everyone who is concerned about the Jewish community and the attacks on them and the harassment and violence that they face. Really disturbing stuff.
And when you juxtapose all that's happening with the time of year that this is supposed to be,
Hanukkah.
it just kind of makes it even more dramatic, because a lot of people are, like I keep bringing up, thinking about this time as such a pleasant time of year where they get that one opportunity, even if it's just for the day or the days you celebrate, to unwind with the people they love. And then we're hearing nothing but stories like this.
Yeah.
It just makes you want to stop down and think of what we all can do better.
Yeah.
The U.S. is experiencing a measles outbreak not seen in decades, and some experts are putting the blame on HHS Secretary RFK Jr. I'll discuss that next in my lens. Stick around.
Welcome back to Rising. Lindsey, what is in your lens today?
Let's talk about it. So for a quarter century, the United States held a quiet but important line. Measles was eliminated here. Not controlled, not rare, eliminated. That distinction mattered because it meant outbreaks didn't last and children didn't die from a disease we already knew how to prevent. That line is now on the verge of disappearing. In 2025, measles cases have surged to levels we haven't seen in decades, and experts say this is not random. It's the predictable result of falling vaccination rates and years of misinformation finally catching up with us. South Carolina has quarantined at least 254 people after confirming more than 24 new cases. The state has logged 123 cases this year alone after reporting just one in all of 2024. In West Texas, more than 700 cases have been confirmed since January, and 2 children have died from complications linked to the virus. Nationwide, the CDC reports 47 measles outbreaks so far this year. Former infectious disease staffer at the CDC, Fiona Haversom, told The Hill, quote, "This is a very clear example of the damage that the anti-vaccine movement has done in the United States." The data backs her up. According to the CDC, 92% of measles cases are among people who are unvaccinated or whose vaccination status is unknown. At the same time, MMR vaccination rates among kindergartners have slipped to 92%, down from 95% right before the pandemic. That may sound like a small drop, but measles exploits small gaps with ruthless efficiency. Even states with high overall vaccination rates aren't immune. In Texas, 94.3% of kindergartners are up to date on their MMR shots. But in Gaines County, the epicenter of the outbreak, 17.6% of kindergartners were exempt from at least one vaccine. Now, measles does not need a majority, it just needs an opening. The U.S. is now approaching a really grim milestone. A country loses its measles elimination status after 12 months of uninterrupted transmission. On January 20th, that clock runs out. A former CDC staffer called the situation, quote, extremely embarrassing for the U.S. Michael Osterholm, director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota, put it more bluntly. He said, quote, we can already say the house is on fire. We don't need to wait for one more smoke alarm to go off to know that's happening. Now, measles didn't come roaring back because science failed. It came back because trust did. Vaccines didn't change. The virus didn't change. What changed was the volume given to fear over facts. And that cost of that choice is now being measured in hospital beds, quarantines, and children's lives. Losing elimination status may sound technical, but living with measles again is absolutely not.
I agree that the spread of measles is a very bad thing, and we should work to eliminate it, and you should get your children vaccinated against it, and health authorities should do everything to make that choice easier, and that's why I've been glad to see Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I think you seem to have a problem with, has written about it, spoken about it, visited the funeral of a child who did die of measles, and said you should get the measles vaccine. So I mean,
well, I think that's
on some level, if people are not, maybe you can force them in schools. You can't just jab people against their will. So you just have to advise them to do it. I don't know what else we can do.
Well, the people who are infectious disease experts that were quoted in this Hill article are not just looking at what RFK Jr. did in the last year, where he is, like you said, attending funerals and speaking about getting vaccinations after someone dies. They're talking about years of conversation and dialogue before he was even in this position, but even during this position where he's connecting vaccinations to things like autism without credible information and series of studies that is required to prove something like that, and then making parents have the ultimatum or the responsibility to make a doctor's choice. It is a parent's choice as well, but then also feel the stress and the weight of feeling like they may have been the cause of something happening to their child because they went with a routine vaccination that has by and large saved more lives than it has affected any lives. And so when we look at the numbers and the way that it was eradicated, and we look at the deaths, for example, or the death of the young child whose parents have made a decision not to vaccinate him in Texas, and then they see that their kid is deceased and they say they still would have made that same choice. It's kind of like, what was compelling this thought process to think it was such a great choice to not vaccinate your child? And this is, again, we're going to see more cases rise. And for something that was largely gone for years, I'm talking about like a quarter of a century, to see it coming back, that has to be a problem. And if people are tying that, the experts are looking to why parents might be making these decisions and seeing patterns of conversations changing about all the things that come from getting vaccinations, well, then
I'm sorry, I have an entirely rival theory for why people have lost faith if skepticism of vaccines is increasing. It's because of the COVID vaccine, which was marketed and sold by health experts in our government in the most baffling and idiotic of ways. If there's a crisis of confidence in vaccination, it's because the COVID vaccine was so vigorously, it was forced on millions of workers. Millions of people were forced to get it who didn't want it, because they were told it stops you from getting COVID, it prevents you from getting COVID. It does a number of good things. I recommend the COVID vaccine for people, particularly who are elderly or have a immunocompromised status. I've gotten it. I've gotten boosted. It does not stop you from getting COVID. Remember, breakthrough cases? It turned out that everyone was going to get a breakthrough case. It mitigates the most severe consequences of the disease for elderly people and some other people. It does not stop you from getting COVID. The measles vaccine does stop you from getting measles to a much, much greater degree. It was wrong, maybe it was wrong to call it a vaccine, even though it works on similar technology. We put these things in the same bucket. So a lot of people who said, oh my God, the COVID vaccine was forced on me, was sold to me by people who were wrong, maybe that's the case for all these other vaccines too. So I point that squarely at Fauci and Birx and all those sorts of people who said, you got to get this to protect your health and protect the health of the people around you. That ended up not being, ended up at least being much more complicated than that. It's not complicated with the measles vaccine, I agree, but people, the misinformation is coming from the health authorities themselves.
We have a like-minded thought process around the COVID vaccine. I told you I was one of the employees that was forced to get it. Very frustrating, especially as a pregnant employee that was forced to get it or keep my job or not know how it will affect my
that's
child.
horrible.
Yeah, so I was in that situation. But I don't think that that's the only reason. I think when we look at RFK being the chosen leader as HHS positioning, he has a history of saying things that you have to acknowledge. We can't just comb over it and say, oh, well, never mind. He's in this position. And he changed his stance after someone died.
He said that no vaccine is entirely safe.
He also has connected vaccine administration to autism without factual information. And as a parent, that's one of the scariest thoughts to think about, is that you, by making a decision for your child, have caused something to affect your child in any way like that. And so if that's on the mind of parents and he's not specifically adamant that he has no dot being connected in that case and no studies that truly do that in a thorough way, then I don't think
you're
that
being
that's
a little
accurate.
too aggressive now. He has pointed to studies and evidence that he thinks are compelling. Now, most or virtually all experts think that the evidence of the studies that he's pointing to are not compelling and are erroneous and are contradicted by volumes of evidence. But he didn't just wake up one day and magically declare
that's what I mean.
this out of
So he's
nowhere.
the guy in charge, and he thinks this is compelling. But most experts are saying this is not correct. You're leading the public in the wrong way, and we should just accept the word of a man who's in this position as opposed to the experts that study this.
Well, okay, but his perspective, he's coming from a consumer harm perspective, where in his view, experts are bought and paid for by the corporations that market these things, and experts said smoking is perfect, is good for you, is healthy for you for years and years and years until they realized,
well,
it actually
we
causes
weren't
cancer.
risking.
That's what
we
he
didn't
thinks
risk
the
losing
case
our measles elimination status under any other HHS secretary besides RFK. So it's like, well, the buck stops with you. Why is it happening right now? COVID, like you said, was almost 6 years ago. Though.
Well, it took a while
for people to say, oh, well,
internalize.
no, the person who doesn't
They're saying,
trust vaccinations.
I really was tricked. I guess I wouldn't give it to my kid.
Just right now, they just started to think that.
Well, we're in the immediate aftermath of COVID.
Up next, a CNN anchor clashed with a panelist who said that certain cultures were not, quote, compatible with the U.S. Stay with us.
CNN host Abby Phillip and New York Post correspondent Lydia Moynihan clashed during a panel discussion about immigration and culture. The two were discussing President Trump's recent comments at a rally last week in Pennsylvania. He admitted he used a certain term during a private meeting with lawmakers in 2018. Let's listen.
Why is it we only take people from whole countries, right? Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few? Let us have a few. From Denmark, do you mind sending us a few people? Send us some nice people, do you mind? But we always take people from Somalia, places that are a disaster, right? Filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime.
Moynihan and Phillip then got into a tense exchange during CNN's Saturday morning Table for Five. Let's watch.
I think we should absolutely select the best of the best. It should be an individual choice. But I think we can also acknowledge there are certain cultures that are not compatible with America.
Which ones?
Well, if we look at Europe, actually, there was a lawyer this week who argued that an Afghan immigrant who raped a woman shouldn't be charged or shouldn't have a penalty because his culture said that women weren't free and equal. We're seeing 77% of rapes in France are from migrants. So there is a real question that people on the right have
what are the cultures?
About certain cultures.
What are the cultures?
Moynihan argued that people from cultures that are okay with certain practices, like, quote, female genital mutilation, shouldn't be let into the country. Phillips then asked Moynihan about the women who would like to flee that sort of thing. Here's more of their exchange.
If you're Somalian, you're a woman, and you're fleeing.
Who were fleeing,
you're actually trying
and they're
to
bringing
leave
it
because
with them. The FBI is now arresting people for bringing that with them.
If you want to leave another country, Afghanistan, because you want to be able to read, the United States says you are not allowed in because culturally you're not compatible with this country. How does that make sense?
Well, I mean, look, my grandparents came from Germany and Poland to escape the Holocaust. And before they got here, the whole USS St. Louis was turned away because Jewish culture was determined at that moment as non-compatible.
Yeah, it was interesting discussion. This is obviously in reaction partly to the Minnesota welfare fraud abuse scandal, which was disproportionately perpetrated by Somalians. I find myself getting annoyed by people on both sides of this conversation, basically based on who I heard last, because when I hear someone like Abby Phillip trying to say that there's no differences between culture, just kind of being a little bit the fool here. Like, what they're saying is people who come from war-torn Middle Eastern countries, Islamic fundamentalist countries, it's religious extremism. Islamic religious extremism is what Lydia is saying is incompatible with the West, and that's not a racist view or what. That's a view of an ideology that I wouldn't want to export a lot of like Christian nationalists either. It's not even religion specific or Hindu radicals or whatever religion. I don't want religious extremism. That's what she's saying. So it's not that crazy to me. But then again, it is also true that we can't, especially when they're here, we can't say, oh, well, we don't like you because we don't like Somalians and you're Somalian, so we got to send you away. We can vet them more properly before they come in. And yes, we do have to be a little selective about which country, because we got to make, I think broad categorization makes most sense in immigration policy when you're considering we want more of these people, less of these people. The reason we don't have tons of people coming in from Denmark is that Denmark's a perfectly nice place to live. So all of Denmark doesn't want to come to here. Somalia is more of a failed state, and people want to leave it and come here.
I mean, I just think just starting from the top, by what the president said, he named Sweden, Denmark, and Norway.
Yeah.
And I think when you
those
say
are
those
high-income countries.
Okay, but when you name those places and say it, you know that the understanding is that we are assuming a lot of the people there are not people of color. And so when you opposite to that name Somalia and say, oh, use the same word that he used for Haiti, I believe, calling it S-hole, and then that's where people of color live. And it's like, okay, we don't govern our laws.
Low GDP.
But we don't govern our laws based on, so like Lydia's example that, you know, Afghan people may consider rape differently than we do in the U.S. or whatever she said, or they do in Europe, and so lawyers arguing that an Afghan person they're representing and be charged differently. That's irrelevant in the U.S. We consider it how we consider it. So if you migrated here and you do anything egregious like that, first of all, you're getting deported, and second of all, you're going to jail. If you know, like either way, you're getting prosecuted properly through our system.
Check it.
But we don't. I know, but we don't also assume that everybody that's coming from Afghanistan wants to be under that mindset, but also is operating under anything that they've learned in the past. Sometimes when people are fleeing dire situations, like migrants that I've interviewed that have come here from Venezuela, it's really life or death for them. Even when you look at the numbers of why migrants that flee dire situations commit less crimes based on like per capita, it's because they literally know that they can get thrown out of the country. They know they can go to jail.
And I think we should take as many Venezuelans as we possibly can, which is why I break from the right. There are several different arguments being made against immigration. I think this if there's an actual cultural difference and there's actually higher crime rates, that is a good reason to reject immigrants of that ideology or from that region. That doesn't apply to the Venezuelans, who they're in America. It's part of America. It's part of the American continent. They don't have contradictory values. They're fleeing socialism. We are against socialism. They're Christian. They want to work. I'm for that category of immigration.
And how do you respond to, I'm not saying that you're siding with Lydia, but when you look at the table conversation, there was a man sitting on the panel that specifically said, yeah, this was the same conversation they had about Jewish people back in the day. They didn't want us here. You are Italian, right? This is the same conversation that they tried to associate all Italians with crime when they didn't want them coming here. But guess what? There are plenty of Italians living in America whose family migrated here that have been great stand-up citizens that have contributed to our society. So just like in the same ways that we shouldn't allow that conversation to stand historically, we shouldn't then start targeting people that shouldn't come because their culture or what you perceive as their culture and how they live by it or don't should be the reasons why they get into America. When most people that come here, even the Somali community, if we're sticking to that recent story, are not abusing our system. It's a small pocket of people in Minnesota. I think when we crunched the numbers, it was like less than 1% of the Somali people that have migrated here have committed a crime. And when you look at how many people during the pandemic committed financial fraud crimes that were American, it's egregiously higher of our own people that have abused the system because they saw an opportunity to do so. So I also think that it's not the right time to tie those two stories together and to make it a time to target that community, as I've been saying, but also then to widen it and to look at what happened in the National Guard incident, like we talked about. That was somebody from Afghanistan that helped the U.S. in many ways fought alongside the U.S. to right the wrongs and then maybe went crazy or whatever. We're still looking into that case. But he did something here. So now we look at all Afghanistan people migrating here and say, oh, bad people. And it's like, that's not always the case. He did everything across the board that would allow somebody to get.
Look, I hear you. And I'm pro-immigration for the most part. But I think the difference people on the right will say between, okay, yes, Jewish immigrants, we want them all. Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, Chinese, Taiwanese, Indians who are going to work hard. The difference between all of them and the Somalians is
it's a black country.
Radical
That
Islam.
is the difference.
Radical Islam.
That's the difference.
I think
that is the wildest thing to not say. That is the wildest thing to not admit and acknowledge that the president has a history of doing. These are poor countries, and he points out the ones of color, and that's the way he always calls it names. Like even
India is a poor country too, and we're going to take as many. I'm for, and Trump is for, taking as many high-skilled workers from India as possible. So I don't think you can say it's not.
But
he's
not taking any of the poor people that will come here and work hard and do all the laborious jobs that Americans are not taking. Like you're saying, the president is against that, even though he's used migrants in many of his businesses.
We have plenty of Hispanics for that. We don't bring them from across the ocean.
I think that we should not just be targeting random countries.
Okay, but the difference is the ideology. The difference is radical Islam, which people have a concern about because of attacks of this nature, of what we just saw in Australia, what we saw at the guard shooting, what we see all over the world. The instability in that. It's not all areas of the world are equally unstable right now. The Middle East, North Africa stand out.
I just think we need to vet people based on actions and not their ancestry. That's not a good vetting tool for immigration here into the U.S. based on actions.
I think when you're here, absolutely, you can't be judged based on the behaviors of someone like you or from your same country. I agree, but our immigration policy does have to be a little. Would you accept that some kind? I mean, we put limits on how much can come from this country and this country.
I think vetting individuals is important, but I think when you look at whole cultures and paint it with a broad stroke brush, that's how we get into like making an entire culture feel isolated from migrating to this country, and I don't think that's the right way to go.
Coming up on Rising, actor and director Rob Reiner has been found dead alongside his wife. Shocking story. We'll be right back after this. More tragic news that broke overnight. American actor and director Rob Reiner was found dead along with his wife Michelle Singer at their Los Angeles home on Sunday afternoon. Now, the Los Angeles Police Department, Captain Mike Bland, said that they were investigating a, quote, apparent homicide. A family member, via a spokesperson, confirmed the couple's death.
The New York Post is reporting that law enforcement sources they spoke with are eyeing the couple's son as a, quote, person of interest. But it's important to note this hasn't been confirmed publicly. People also reported similar details. A spokesperson for the family said in a statement, quote, "It is with profound sorrow that we announce the tragic passing of Michelle and Rob Reiner. We are heartbroken by this sudden loss, and we ask for privacy during this unbelievably difficult time." Reiner was a notable Democratic Party activist in Hollywood. Former President Obama wrote on X, quote, "Michelle and I are heartbroken by the tragic passing of Rob Reiner and his beloved wife, Michelle. Rob's achievements in film and television gave us some of our most cherished stories on screen. But beneath all of the stories he produced was a deep belief in the goodness of people and a lifelong commitment to putting that belief into action. Together, he and his wife lived lives defined by purpose. They will be remembered for the values they championed and the countless people they inspired. We send our deepest condolences to all who love them."
Reiner regularly hosted fundraisers for Democrats and campaigned on liberal issues like same-sex marriage. One of his major roles was being a foil to the conservative Archie Bunker in All in the Family. Reiner also directed the movie Stand By Me and When Harry Met Sally. Really sad. I was reading the details in TMZ. It sounds like a really brutal killing for which their son is a suspect, but just that there might have been some kind of altercation. Really sad news. Rob Reiner is actually not someone whose work I'm overly familiar with. I've seen The Princess Bride, though. That's a good movie. A lot of people like that one.
A Few Good Men?
A Few Good Men. I've never actually seen it.
And you can't handle the truth?
He's made a tremendous number of good movies. Really exceptional run of films in the 80s and early 90s. Very popular director. I saw outpouring of support for him, even from I mean, this shouldn't be surprising, but from very conservative people who stridently disagree with his politics. He was a big old-fashioned liberal Democrat, saying how sad this is, how terrible this is, what a great artist he was, and what a decent. He seems like is remembered as a very warm, kind, generous person, a fun personality in his many appearances as a commentator and pundit as well. Really, really sad news.
Yeah, he's like one of those cross-generational people from like All in the Family to acting to directing. When you think about all the different projects that he's been involved in, for like my parents to know him, us to know him, and his films to live on in this way. And I think the disturbing part to me is when you think about a household that's so, and this is all reported, waiting for more information to come out, but if it is connecting his son allegedly in any way to this, a household that's so associated with success and creativity, because his father was also in the entertainment business.
His dad, yeah.
And so,
Reiner.
yeah, so when you think about like so many years of what is perceived to be success and creativity from the outside looking in, and think about what must have been going on inside the family for it to be any type of disagreement that went this far. Yeah, it's so much that we're going to learn in the coming days. It's just so sad. It goes back to the same time. Again, we're a couple weeks away from, or days away from Christmas, if you celebrate Hanukkah. However, like we're literally in the midst of this season, and to have some tragic news like this, it doesn't only affect the people that were inside their immediate family, but all the people that would have expected to see or touch or be around them.
A big Jewish figure. Obviously, there are a lot of successful Jewish people in Hollywood and entertainment, but as someone who, through his role on All in the Family and other places, was known to viewers, was a prominent Jewish person who, if you were not familiar with Jewish people or culture, learned about from him. So again, kind of a blow to the community. All these tragedies, so many of them that we're discussing today on the show have that element of it. Very, very sad. We will be staying tuned for more details when they come out regarding this grisly death. That does it for us on Rising Live for today. However, look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so that you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're available anywhere you listen to podcasts, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.